We are approaching week 15 of the 2025 NFL season, and we're almost done with the 2025 draft class's rookie year. So I wanted to put a letter grade on how these 32 first round picks have played so far. And I'll be taking into account how they were selected as well. Did a team trade up? Did a team trade down? We're also going to take into account what's their environment like. Did they just get thrown into a dumpster fire? Did they at least show some flashes on tape that don't show up in the box score? And maybe we'll do a redraft or a regrade at the end of the year or in the offseason. So make sure you're subscribed. Let's get into this now. We're going to start off at number 1, which is obviously Cam Ward of the Tennessee Titans. Usually when a number 1 pick gets selected, especially as a quarterback, they're getting thrown into a terrible environment, and that was the case with Cam Ward. His head coach got fired in Brian Callahan. His wide receiver, one who's getting paid over $20 million, Calvin Ridley, was not good for him. His offensive line was extremely inconsistent, and the defense is an absolute mess. But for Cam Ward so far, I'm going to give this a C. If you're looking at just the numbers or the production, it's a D or an F, but I think Cam Ward has shown enough flashes this year that if you have just a competent organization and team around him, he could be your franchise quarterback going forward. He's going to be 24 years old in May, and going into year number 2, he was a little bit on the older side when he was selected number 1 overall out of Miami. So far this year, he's got about 2,500 passing yards, 9 touchdowns, to 7 interceptions, and his receivers have really done him no favors. I talked about how bad Calvin Ridley has been for the Titans, and he's out for the year, so he's been throwing it to a bunch of other rookies as well, like DK and Io Maynor. The ground game has never really been a benefit for Tennessee this year, with Tony Pollard's best game coming pretty much in week number 14. Like I said, I do think that Cam Ward will be the franchise guy in Tennessee. Maybe they do need to add another offensive lineman in the offseason. They desperately need a wide receiver 1 target for Cam Ward. That was supposed to be Calvin Ridley. It didn't work out. Maybe they end up drafting somebody like a Jordan Tyson or a Carnell Tate in the 2025 draft. So yeah, I think when you look at what Cam Ward did and you kind of zoom out a little bit and you see, okay, it wasn't the greatest environment, I think his production is a lot better than you can give him credit for. So I'm going to give it a C right there in the middle. You can let me know if you agree or disagree with that one. The Jacksonville Jaguars traded up in the draft with the Cleveland Browns to select Travis Hunter, who is an extremely unique prospect because he can play corner and he can play receiver. I'm giving this selection, when you take into account the trade as well, a C-. The Jaguars might win the division this year, but they're not going to have Travis Hunter on their roster. He suffered a season-ending injury after 7 games. On the offensive side of the field, 45 targets, 28 catches, 298 yards, and 1 touchdown on the year. And if you really take out that London game against the Rams in which they lost by 28, he really didn't do anything all year long, at least offensively. He was a solid enough corner though in coverage, and I think it's going to be fascinating to see how he's involved going into year number 2. But for what they gave up, he only played 7 games this year, so I think it's kind of unfair to grade him just on a 7-game sample size. So that's why I was going to throw it around a C, because I still think he looked the part of a top 3 pick in the draft. It's just they also gave up their first rounder this year. Now, luckily for them, they're not the Atlanta Falcons. They're not giving the Cleveland Browns a top 10 pick, but they did give up decent draft capital to go out and get Travis Hunter, who I don't think they really utilized properly at the start of the year. We'll see if that changes in year number 2. Top 3 hasn't really aged the best so far, because at number 3, Abdul Carter to the New York Giants, the unanimous number 1 defensive player in this class when we got up to the April 2025 draft. I'm giving this one an F. Carter has 1.5 sacks this year in 13 games. He's also been penalized by the New York Giants for being late to meetings as well, and that's just not what you want to see for somebody that you took with the 3rd overall pick. We knew at the time the Giants were not going to be able to land a quarterback at the top of the draft. They weren't going to get Cam Ward at 3. They tried to trade up. They were never going to take Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart at 3 either. But life was supposed to be made easy for Abdul Carter, going to a defensive line that had Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and he's looked no part of somebody that went 3rd overall. Now, he's still just 22 years old. I think he's going to be a lot better in year number 2. And I'm not really giving this pick an F. I'm giving Abdul Carter's production in his rookie year an F, just because you're giving me 1.5 sacks, 17 tackles in 13 games. A little bit of an off the field issue. He's got 1 tackle for a loss this year, 13 QB hits. He did look the part against New England last Monday. So hopefully this is a sign that he's going to go in the right direction and finish off his rookie season on the right note, because he definitely needs it. This Giants team can 100% take a leap next year. They're currently owning the number 1 overall pick in the 2026 draft. We know that they would probably trade down in that. But yeah, if the Giants want to make the playoffs and be a breakout team in 2026, Abdul Carter needs to be a lot more productive than he's been in his rookie season. And it makes it look a little bit worse because number 4 overall was Will Campbell to the New England Patriots. We all knew at this time that Will Campbell was maybe going to get docked a little bit because of his small arm size, and you may have to bump him into the interior offensive line. And a lot of teams do not justify taking an interior offensive lineman in the top 4. Well, the Patriots took Will Campbell at number 4, and he's been an absolute beast for them. I'm going to give this one an A so far for the New England Patriots. Unfortunately, Will Campbell recently got injured. He's going to be out for a little bit, but his season might not be over, so we may see him actually play playoff football in his rookie year. But he was a really good pass protector for Drake May while he was healthy, giving the Patriots over 730 good snaps on the field. And this is just a franchise offensive tackle, or at worst a franchise offensive guard for the Patriots to protect your franchise quarterback going forward. He's just 21 years old. They didn't overthink this one. They didn't take like an Ashton Genty or maybe trade out of the spot, because if you remember at the time of the draft, it felt like it was a 3-person draft at the top with Cam Ward if you needed a quarterback, Travis Hunter, any team could use a corner or a receiver, or Abdul Carter, a premier edge rusher. And it feels like Will Campbell has been the best of at least the top 3-4 guys so far. Man, I've been back and forth this year with Mason Graham of the Cleveland Browns, and I'm going to give this one a B+. Now, you can make an argument this could be an A-. Maybe Browns fans think this should be an A as well. They traded down with the Jacksonville Jaguars to select Mason Graham, the defensive interior lineman out of Michigan, and I think he's had his good moments this year. He's had his bad moments. He gets double teamed a decent amount. Obviously, the opposing offensive line has to focus so much on Myles Garrett. Therefore, Mason Graham's life could be made a little bit easier, but he was a monster this year against the Jets, against the Raiders, and against the Dolphins. But he struggled against teams like the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings and maybe the Tennessee Titans this past Sunday. But the Browns were also able to get some good additional draft capital for the long term. Maybe they could have taken a tackle here. Maybe Armand Membu would have been the right pick in hindsight, but I think this is a good selection. He's still just 22 years old. He's going to be on this defensive line with Myles Garrett for the next 4+ years, and they got some additional draft capital out of it. That's why I'm going to give it a B+. And yeah, this one is very tough to try to quantify. We have Ashton Genty, number 6 to the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm going to give this one a D. Now, based off just production throughout 13 starts, averaging about 50 yards per game for the 6th overall pick, you could definitely give this an F. But when you look at the Raiders' offensive game plan, their quarterback play, and more specifically the offensive line, I don't even know if Jonathan Taylor would have been able to succeed this year if he was in Ashton Genty's position. I was watching them up close in person against the Cleveland Browns this year, and he has really no room. He's met at the line of scrimmage almost every single rushing attempt. I still think he looks the part of somebody that was the runner-up to the Heisman Award in 2024, and he could be a franchise running back in this league. I think this is just a valuable lesson for us going forward. Do not take a running back in the top 10, let alone the top 6, if you do not have the offensive line infrastructure in place, because unless they are a true generational running back, which maybe some people thought Ashton Genty was, it's still going to be insanely tough to be productive when you just have no room to run whatsoever. You have no consistent game plan, and you are down in every single game, and you can't just develop the run game whatsoever. And coming in here at number 7, the New York Jets selected Armand Membu, probably in hindsight the player the Raiders should have taken at number 6, and I'm giving this one an A. It was a really good top 10 in terms of offensive linemen. Will Campbell's looked the part, Armand Membu's looked the part, and I think he could maybe be the best offensive lineman from this draft, and has maybe been the best player here in the top 10, or maybe the best player in the first round so far in these guys' rookie seasons. Membu was the offensive tackle coming out of Mizzou. He was not really placed in the best position in the world. The Jets have not really been like a dumpster fire this year, but they did trade Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams at the deadline. They were the last team to win a game here in the 2025 season. We'll see who their quarterback's going to be next year. Maybe they find their franchise quarterback in the 2027 draft. Either way, whoever it's going to be, they are going to have a franchise cornerstone offensive tackle in Armand Membu to protect them. He's been super consistent in the pass blocking scheme, the run blocking scheme, and the Jets made the right pick here. Still just 21 years old. With the first receiver off the board at number 8, Tedero McMillan out of Arizona to the Carolina Panthers, a team that desperately needed a wide receiver 1, and I'm giving this pick an A as well. Maybe I'm a little bit generous here to Ted McMillan, but if you remember, leading up to the 2025 draft, there were like scouts that were coming from somebody as a source that was saying, yeah, does Ted McMillan really like football? I don't know. I think he looks pretty good this year, and it looks like he enjoys playing receiver for the Carolina Panthers. He's got about 57 catches for 826 yards and 6 touchdowns here in 13 games as a rookie. He really wasn't involved too much in his last game against the LA Rams. He had 1 catch, but it was for 43 yards and a touchdown. He was a monster this year against Atlanta. He was great against Buffalo, and he was really good against Arizona earlier in the year. I do think the 6'5" receiver is going to be the franchise wide receiver 1 for this team. He's so much better than Xavier Legette, a first rounder from the 2024 draft, and I'm excited to see what the connection looks like with Bryce Young going forward, because maybe the Panthers are in the playoffs this year and they win the NFC South. We had another offensive lineman selected here, number 9, Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas to the New Orleans Saints. This was a little bit high at the time when he got selected. I think Banks has looked really good this year. I'm giving this one an A-. I still think Campbell and Membu have looked a little bit better, but Banks still gets that A- letter grade because the Saints also are a team this year that has not been good. They've gone to multiple quarterbacks now. Tyler Shuck does look impressive, but I think Kelvin Banks has got some really good pass blocking and run blocking reps with this team going forward. Still just 21 years old. I think they hit on Tawise Fuaga as well, and now we have the exterior protection for either Tyler Shuck or their next franchise quarterback going forward. Maybe this team could draft a running back in the top 10 because you do have your offensive lineman in place going forward, and I think Banks is a home run selection. Some people thought he could play guard. He's been really good this year as a tackle. Also, I'm not sure if I'm being generous with this one as well. Colston Loveland to the Bears at number 10. I'm giving this one a B-. It took a little bit of time for Loveland to really be involved in this Bears offense, but over the last 6 or so weeks, he's been basically the number 2 target for this team. He broke out against the Cincinnati Bengals this year. A lot of players were doing that against their defense. 6 catches, 118 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And I do think he should be targeted a little bit more. Ben Johnson has said multiple times this year that the offensive pass game has not really been their bread and butter. They've been a lot more effective in the run game, and he wants to turn around the passing game. So if this is going to be like the least effective Bears passing game we may see in Loveland's career, I will definitely take this production. It does make the pick look a little bit worse because I like the tight end that was selected at number 14, and maybe at number 10 this was a little bit high. Maybe in hindsight you trade down and you take Colston Loveland, but a lot of people fell in love with Loveland pre-draft. I don't think he's been like an elite tight end here in year number 1 in his first 12 games, but I think he's been a solid pick. Now, unfortunately, Michael Williams of the San Francisco 49ers suffered a season-ending injury after 9 games. I mean, the Niners have kind of been cursed this year defensively with like Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, and Michael Williams. I didn't love this pick when it happened. I thought he was an extremely raw pass rusher or defensive lineman coming out of Ohio State. And I'm not going to say he was really good in those 9 games, so I'm going to give this one a C- just because I think it's unfair since his season is over. He only played 9 games, and I think he struggled at times this year, but we didn't really get to see Michael play with Fred Warner and Nick Bosa for a decent amount of time. So hopefully all these guys are just healthy, ready to go in week 1 of the 2026 season, because the Niners are getting to be an expensive roster. They're not able to go out and sign a bunch of guys on the defensive line. So we'll see if Michael Williams can step up in that interior. This has looked like a really good offensive line draft so far. Coming in at number 12, we have Tyler Booker to the Dallas Cowboys. I'm giving this one an A. Shout out to the offensive lineman here. And Booker is our first interior offensive lineman selected, so maybe not the premier position like an offensive tackle like Campbell, Membu, or Kelvin Banks, but Booker has been rock solid this year for the Dallas Cowboys. He's played over 720 snaps for this team, being really good in their run blocking scheme. Maybe he struggled a little bit as a pass blocker this year, but the Dallas Cowboys, I think, hit on Tyler Booker 12th overall. Maybe he went a little bit higher than expected, but it seems like he could just be a franchise guard for this team going forward. He's allowed Javonte Williams to really exceed expectations here in his first year in Dallas. He's been a solid protector who's only going to continue to get better for Dak Prescott going forward. And yeah, this pick could be a lot worse because we know that the Dallas Cowboys traded for a defensive lineman at the trade deadline in Quentin Williams. Good thing they didn't draft the defensive lineman of Kenneth Grant, who could still be really good in his career, but based on the production so far, I unfortunately have to give this an F. Now, I just hope the 2025 Dolphins D-line is just a wash. Dalen Phillips really struggled at the start of the year. Bradley Chubb was not having his moments. Chop Robinson definitely hit a sophomore slump, and Kenneth Grant could not really generate any pass rush whatsoever this year. He's the 113th graded interior defensive lineman according to PFF out of 128. He's one of the worst run defensive D tackles in the league this season, and maybe we're seeing that he was able to be a little bit more effective at Michigan because he was playing alongside Mason Mason Graham on that defensive interior front. Like I said, I just hope this is a complete wash for everybody on the Miami Dolphins defensive line going forward. But yeah, it's probably going to be a rookie season to forget for Kenneth Grant, and maybe was a reason why Chris Greer ended up getting let go. I didn't really think the Dolphins were going to draft a tight end, but maybe in hindsight, they should have taken Tyler Warren, who was the 14th overall pick out of Penn State. I'm giving this one an A for the Indianapolis Colts so far. He's maybe been slowing down a little bit over the last few weeks, but he's been definitely one of the best rookie tight ends. We're not going to talk about Harold Fannin today, but he's definitely been coming alive as of late. So far on the year, Tyler Warren, 60 catches for 699 yards and 4 touchdowns throughout 13 games. The 6'6" tight end has been everything the Indianapolis Colts needed in their passing attack. He could maybe be a little bit better as a run blocker, but I think that can come around. He's on the older side at 23, and I'm fascinated to see how he is with Phillip Rivers. Yeah, his quarterback's going to be 21 years older than him, who's going to play in week 15 most likely. And I do wonder what's going to happen with the Colts in the offseason. Are they going to bring back Daniel Jones? Are they going to re-sign Alec Pierce, who a lot of people think is going to get a ton of money in free agency? They have Pittman, they have Downs, they traded away AD Mitchell. So there's a chance that Tyler Warren is 100% the number 1 target next year, or at least the number 2. And I know it's kind of weird right now for the Atlanta Falcons and their team. That's just been very disappointing this year, and they don't own their first round pick, but the player they selected with their first round pick last year at pick number 15, Jalen Walker, has looked the part in year number 1 as a 21-year-old. This one is getting an A because you could play Walker all over the field. He's lined up on the defensive line and in the box a little bit, and we know that he can be an off-ball linebacker as well. We saw that at Georgia last year, so now I have this super versatile linebacker that you could play on the edge or at the linebacker position. That is a luxury to have in the National Football League, given that he's 21 years old, given that he's been an absolute beast this year in the run defense department. And I think he's still refining his skills as a coverage linebacker in the NFL. This is somebody that is going to be the franchise building block on the Atlanta Falcons defense. One of the worst defenses, or at least one of the worst front sevens in the league in 2024, has looked a lot better this year, largely in part of them drafting Jalen Walker out of Georgia. All right, so the 16th overall pick, Walter Nolan, is kind of tough to grade just because he played 4 games. He got off to a late start this year because of an injury, and he has been banged up as of late as well, just appearing in 4 games in the month of November. But he looked good in those 4 games as well. So he's played around 100 snaps this year. I would say in those 4 games, which is an extreme small sample size, it's a B+. It looks like that he's going to be a really good pass rusher in this league. The Ole Miss defensive lineman kind of rose up draft boards later in the process and almost was being considered as like the number 2 defensive tackle in this draft. Even though like Michael Williams and Kenneth Grant ended up going ahead of him, I think he's looked better in that smaller sample size than those 2 guys ahead of him, and maybe looks closer to Mason Graham as the best defensive interior lineman selected in the first round. I mean, it's not been a great year for the Arizona Cardinals, and they didn't really hit on their first round pick in 2024. We'll see how Nolan looks later in the year if he does return from the knee injury. Last year was a disaster for the Cincinnati Bengals, even though Joe Burrow was maybe the best statistical quarterback in the NFL, and Jamar Chase was definitely the best statistical wide receiver, so they needed any help they can get on the defensive side of the field. So they ended up drafting Shamar Stewart, the edge rusher out of A&M, and it did not get off to a great start off the field before the year started, being one of the last rookies to sign and maybe even threaten to go back to school, and he was not great when he was out there in 177 snaps. The Bengals were still one of the worst defenses in the NFL, and then he got put on injury reserve in week number 9. There's still a good chance that he's going to come back this season, but man, the Bengals have not really hit on their first round edge rushers as of late. A couple years ago, it was Miles Murphy out of Clemson, who hasn't really exceeded expectations whatsoever, and Shamar Stewart looks like he's in line there. Hopefully he could break out in 2026, or maybe has a really good end to the 2025 season, because the Bengals need him to. They're probably going to lose Trey Hendrickson in the offseason, and who else is going to rush the passer next year? Now, I've had a tough time evaluating Gray Zabel this year for the Seattle Seahawks. I think there's been some good moments, and I think there's been some bad moments as well. So Seahawks fans, I'd love to know what grade you would put on him. I'm going to give it a C-. You can let me know if I'm far off with that one, because Zabel, I think, has looked pretty good in the pass blocking department, which the Seattle Seahawks needed, moving on from Geno Smith and having maybe a more frantic quarterback in Sam Darnold. But he's kind of been abysmal in run blocking plays this year. Now, you can let me know if maybe that comes back on Kenneth Walker, maybe that comes back on Charbonnet, the offensive line coach, or something like that. But I think it's been like a tale of 2 halves this year for Gray Zabel, so I'm going to give it a C-, and let me know if you would change that. Speaking about a tale of 2 halves, we got to talk about Emeka Egbuka from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who was selected 19th overall out of Ohio State, who looked like the front runner to win Offensive Rookie of the Year at the start of the year, but he's he's not really been effective over the last few weeks. And that can really be in line with Baker Mayfield being maybe banged up and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers not being a good team over the last month. He really wasn't that effective against Buffalo, Los Angeles, Arizona, or their most recent loss to the New Orleans Saints. He does not look like the guy that had 7 for 163 and a touchdown against Seattle, or 6 for 115 against the Patriots and a touchdown as well in early November. I mean, he still has pretty much better statistics across the board than Ted McMillan, and I gave that one an A. So I'm still going to give Emeka Egbuka an A as well. I do wonder how he's going to finish off because he got off to such a good start. It's been a bad last month, and we'll see if he can finish off strong. I know Mike Evans is coming back, so we'll see if Emeka's production goes down. And it's been a weird pick for number 20 overall, Jahdae Barron. Maybe some people's cornerback one in the class. He was the second corner off the board when you consider Travis Hunter at number 2. And Barron has kind of been all over the place this year for the Denver Broncos, but he also hasn't been utilized a ton. I mean, Denver wasn't a team that didn't really need another corner. You had the reigning deep point Patrick Surtain. You had Riley Moss. So you're bringing in Jahdae Barron to be maybe a third string corner when you could have addressed it, maybe a receiver here. Maybe they wanted Emeka Egbuka or somebody like that. Maybe you could have went depth offensive line here, but Barron has not really been a great coverage corner this year. I feel like it's also not been a great sample size. They've thrown him in the slot. They've thrown him out wide a little bit. He's been on special teams as well. And Barron's 24 years old, so I do wonder what direction he's going to head in going forward, and if he's ever going to emerge as like a true CB2 next to Patrick Surtain for the Broncos' future. The Pittsburgh Steelers ended up going an interior defensive lineman at number 21, Derek Harmon out of Oregon. You had a lot of hype to Derek Harmon leading up to the NFL draft after not really being considered a first rounder at the end of the 2024 collegiate season, but Oregon ends up making the college football playoffs, and the Steelers fell in love with Derek Harmon. Now, they didn't really need to take a defensive tackle. I would say the Steelers needed a receiver, a corner, or maybe a quarterback a little bit more. They traded away their second rounder for DK Metcalf, and they selected Derek Harmon, who unfortunately suffered a knee injury in the preseason, which gave him a later start this year. In 330 snaps, he's been a pretty good run stopper, but he's not really generating any pass rush whatsoever. Now, as a Steelers fan, the defense this year has been a massive disappointment, which I think can come down on some of their veterans and some of their personnel decisions, but also coaching itself. Terrell Austin, Mike Tomlin, I don't really think have adjusted well this year to any of their opponents, really. So maybe I should give Derek Harmon the benefit of the doubt. I think there's been some good, some bad. I'm giving it a C+. I just wish at this point maybe they selected Jackson Dart. Another smaller sample size rookie season, a Marion Hampton who selected 22nd overall out of North Carolina to the LA Chargers. I'm just going to give this one a C. He's only played 6 games so far, and the Chargers offensive line right now isn't great. Now, it's actually been holding its own. I thought it was going to be so much worse when Joe Alt was out for the year after already missing Rashawn Slater. And yeah, the offensive line could definitely be better, but they were going up against the Eagles on Monday night. That's a really good pass rush. And unfortunately, Hampton was kind of finding his stride before he went on injured reserve. He had 12 for 128 against the Giants, 19 for 70 and a touchdown against the Broncos. Then he gets hurt against the Washington Commanders in week number 5 and comes back against the Philadelphia Eagles. He had 13 for 56 in this game as well. I'm really going to be fascinated to watch Marion Hampton next year in year number 2. Hopefully Slater and Alt are healthy. Maybe the interior offensive line gets a little bit better. Maybe the Chargers draft one in the 2026 draft, and we could see a full season sample size out of their first round running back. But we had another offensive skill position guy go, number 23. The Packers never draft first round receivers. They may never take another one after Matthew Golden's rookie year. Yeah, I got to give his production an F, unfortunately. Matthew Golden never really had a breakout game this year for the Green Bay Packers. He had 3 catches for 86 yards against the Cincinnati Bengals back in October, but everybody kind of has their best games this year against the Cincinnati Bengals. He has 1 game this year with 5 catches, 2 games this year with 4 catches, and just 1 game this year with more than 60 receiving yards, and that was against the Cincinnati Bengals. That's not the production you want from a first round receiver. And now that the Packers are getting healthier with Jaden Reed coming back, Christian Watson looks like the wide receiver one for this team. You have Dontavion Wicks and Romeo Doubs and Bo Melton and Luke Musgrave all in the fold. He had 1 target against the Chicago Bears last Sunday, and I feel like at times this year he's kind of used as a gadget guy. We'll see if there's going to be some turnover in the Packers receiving room in the 2026 offseason, because right now, based off the 10 games in his career, I gotta give it an F. I know it feels harsh, but he has not been productive. 24 catches, 286 yards as a first round receiver. In hindsight, the Minnesota Vikings should have seen if the Atlanta Falcons would have given them their first round pick for pick 24. They probably would have, because they gave the Rams their first round pick in 2026 for pick 26. So the Vikings take Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State at 24, the interior offensive lineman. I'm going to give this one a C. I think, like Gray Zabel, there's been some good this year. There's been some bad this year. I don't think he's been nearly as good as Tyler Booker has in Dallas, and it's been kind of a disaster for Minnesota this year. Obviously, that's largely in part because of their quarterback play, but the offensive line has been kind of all over the place. I thought Kwesi was one of the better general managers going into this year's season. I don't know if I can really believe that anymore. I will say that Donovan Jackson has looked better as a pass blocker than a run blocker, and hopefully he could just get better in year number 2 because Minnesota hasn't really hit on a lot of draft picks as of late. All right, so I haven't really given out an A+ here. I don't know if anybody's been like a true A+ guy. This first round has been all over the place this year. You can maybe give the Jackson Dart production an A+. I don't know though. I think if you are grading the pick, it's probably an A+ for the Giants, trading back up into the first round, not giving up their 2026 first like the Falcons did for the very next pick, and they got their franchise quarterback. Dart this year has looked really good, and his production I think has been A level. I don't know about A+ level production. Like Jaden Daniels last year was A+ level production out of a rookie. Dart this year, I'm going to give it an A. He's got 11 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 1,556 passing yards on the year. He's got about 337 yards on 61 attempts this year as a runner, 7 rushing touchdowns as well, so 18 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Dart has looked like a franchise quarterback for the Giants, something they've never really had maybe since Eli Manning. I know Daniel Jones technically was their franchise quarterback, but I think what we've seen from Dart this year in 10 games really blows away any Daniel Jones sample size across 10 games when he was a Giant. We just got to give Jackson Dart some protection. Hopefully this team gets them another wide receiver and he can have that guy, Wan'Dale Robinson and Malik Neighbors next year, and maybe invest in the offensive line a little bit more as well, because Dart has taken some really bad hits this year, which some are his fault as well. Oh man, this one is tough. James Pierce, 26th overall to the Atlanta Falcons. Like, the thought process, I kind of want to give this an F just because the Falcons are probably going to give the Rams a top 10 pick this year, maybe even better than that. But Pierce this year has been solid for the Titans, so I'm going to give this one a C. That could be generous, but I do think Pierce can be a solid edge rusher for this team long term. He was a raw edge rusher coming out of Tennessee that was going to need some time to develop. But hey, 6 sacks throughout 13 games as a rookie, a forced fumble, 6 tackle for losses, 11 QB hits. He's been a lot better than Abdul Carter, who went 3rd overall. Did you really have to give up your 2026 first rounder, Atlanta? Because that it's just a wild decision. I'm going to make a cross-sport parallel, but it really feels like Derek Queen to the Pelicans in the NBA is exactly what the Falcons did with James Pierce. And I do wonder if his head coach, Raheem Morris, is going to be let go at the end of the year. I think Pierce has been good, maybe a B+ level production, but the thought process as well, I got to give it a C. It's leaving a bad taste in my mouth. The Baltimore Ravens got the steal of the draft, in my opinion, on the night of the draft in Malachi Starks out of Georgia. This pick, though, has been all right this year. I'm going to give it a C+ for the Baltimore Ravens. I think that Malachi Starks has been a solid safety in terms of run defense, but I don't think he's been great as a coverage safety. Now, there has been so many injuries to Baltimore this year on the offensive side and on the defensive side. I like that Zachary Orr feels comfortable playing him in all different positions. He's lined up on the defensive line, box, slot corner, out wide, free safety, and playing a ton of special teams as well. He just turned 22 years old last month. I think if this Ravens defense is just a little bit more healthy next year, he's going to have maybe a much more productive year number 2. I like a formidable duo next to a Lee McNeil on that defensive line with Aiden Hutchinson as well. Josh Conerly went 1 pick later, 29, to the Washington Commanders, a team that's also had just a disastrous 2025 season. I'm going to give this one a C. I do think Conerly was not really thrown into the best environment here in Washington. Maybe you can give this one a lower grade, but he's not going to be hit as hard with a bad grade because it was a later pick. If he was selected 3rd overall, it would probably be an F, but he was selected 29th overall, so I'm going to give it a C. I think there's potential there. I think he's looked fine as a run blocker this season. But yeah, I think Washington is just hoping everybody's better in 2026 than they were in 2025. The Buffalo Bills selected a corner, Maxwell Harrison, a combine standout at 30 out of Kentucky. Harrison got off to a later start this year, so he didn't debut till week number 8 against Carolina, where he only played 27 snaps. He played 30 against Kansas City, 53 against Miami, and he's not been involved too much for Buffalo this year, so I think it's kind of hard to grade him at the moment, so I'm going to give it a C. I still think there's potential there. He's one of the quickest players on the field, but you know, we give that grace to young players. And I don't know if Buffalo was ever going to take Jahad Campbell, but he looks a lot better, who was selected 1 pick later to the Philadelphia Eagles. Jahad Campbell got off to a fantastic start this year for Philadelphia. I'm going to give this one a B+. Howie Roseman traded up 1 pick to take Campbell, the off-ball linebacker out of Alabama. He was a stud to start off the year. Now, he hasn't really been involved too much as of late for Philadelphia, and I do wonder what his role is going to be moving forward, but he's still just 21 years old. I trust these Howie Roseman picks. But yeah, it's been a weird last few weeks for Campbell and Philly, but it was such a good start. And to wrap this out at number 32, the Kansas City Chiefs selected Josh Simmons out of Ohio State. I'm going to give this one a B. I think when Simmons has been out there, he's looked really good for Kansas City, but he's had some injuries and some personal things that he's been dealing with this year. And obviously, this has just been a disastrous year for the Kansas City Chiefs, a team that is 6-7. Yeah, the reigning AFC champions, maybe a dynasty in Kansas City, the best quarterback going into the year in Patrick Mahomes. This team is 6-7. I don't think that's been Josh Simmons' fault. I think he's been a good pass blocker, maybe not as good of a run blocker. Kansas City has some bigger issues right now. So that is going to be for me. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, I'd appreciate you dropping a thumbs up. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below about my grades. And let me know maybe who's having a standout rookie year that didn't go in the first round. Let me know down below. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.